what I wish I would have understood when I first moved into leadership was it's okay to play to your strengths.
Buongiorno. You're listening to Going, Where God is at Work, a podcast that sits at the intersection of missions theory and practice. We're walking out our call to ministry in faraway places and happy to have you join us on the journey. I'm your host, Jesse Pauly, a missions leader serving in Rome, and I'm here with Jen Williamson, our missiologist who lives and works in Lyon. And that's right, I skipped over Alessandro. He's not able to be with us today, but we have, for our interview, Steve Schmidt. Welcome, everyone.
Hey.
Hey, thanks, Jesse.
I want to introduce Steve real quick. Steve embarked on a short-term mission to Niger in the summer of 1988, where he met Mickey, his wife, who was also a long-term in the region. They got married in 1990 and returned to Niger in 1992. And their work was among the Tamajak people, focused on evangelism, discipleship, partnering with local churches. And this ministry required Steve and Mickey to study Tamajak, Hausa, French, and effectively connect with the diverse communities they served. And then in 2006, he became the country director for SIM Niger, a role that he was in until 2018. And then his leadership journey continued when in September 2019, he was appointed the regional director for SIM West Africa. Steve and Mickey are proud parents of 3 married children and grandparents to 3 wonderful grandchildren. And we just wanted to welcome Steve and say thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Is there anything I missed on this? Are you an author of any books or have any other titles that maybe we needed to throw in there?
No, the titles would be strictly honorary.
Okay.
And probably titles I would have given myself, so no.
Oh, that's great. That is great. I tell people all the time, I think the only doctorate I would ever get would be an honorary doctorate, maybe one day. Hey, so obviously we're continuing our conversation on leadership and field leadership. And as I just mentioned, Steve has experience both in a country-specific leadership role, but then also over a region. So we're excited to get into some of that. But before we need a icebreaker question before we get into some of the heavier, deep stuff that we'll be talking about. If your leadership style or some sort of fictional character, be it from a movie, book, TV series, what would it be? Who would it be? And why?
All right, I got my answer.
What is it?
Ted Lasso.
Ooh, okay.
I don't know if you guys have watched Ted Lasso, but one of his philosophies, he's an American football coach who moves to England to coach a UK football team, the real football, I will say. And he knows nothing about it. But what he says is he wants those young men on that team to be the best men they can be on and off the field. He's not as interested in winning. And that's the crux of my leadership. I tell teams when I'm leading a team, okay, so we're going to do this thing, whatever the project is, whatever the team is about. Let's say it's for a conference. We're going to make this conference. We're going to do this conference. We're going to do it really well. We're going to make sure the logistics are smooth. We're going to get good speakers. We're going to be well organized. We're going to, do the best. But in the meantime, as we work on this together, God is working on us. So the conference might be the project in our mind, but in God's mind, we're the project. And this is really an opportunity for us to be transformed into the image of Christ as we join together around this goal. And so that idea of leadership being about investing in people for them to become the best versions of themselves or what God ultimately designed them to be, that to me is the point. And the tasks and the projects and the missions and the things that we're doing, that's God's means to get us there.
I like that.
Yeah, I thought of a book. It's actually called Watership Down. It's an old book. It's a classic. And it's a favorite in our family. I say it's one of my all-time favorite leadership books. And the character I would pick is Hazel Raw. He is the primary character, but he leads a band of rabbits away from danger and into a new place where they can settle down and set up a new community. But he isn't the rabbit that has all the skills, but he's the rabbit that identifies the skills in others and brings their giftings together. And I think of the book Team of Teams by Stanley McChrystal, where he says that no longer are we looking for the heroic leader. The world is too complex for that. We need leaders who are more like gardeners, who create and cultivate an environment where everybody's gifts come together. So I'm picking Hazel Raw from Watership Down.
Good choice.
I have not read that, but now you have me interested in reading it. I think I didn't know which one, but I was going to say The Avengers as a movie in general, because I feel similarly. I like pulling together a lot of different people that don't look like they should all be together, and maybe sometimes don't even agree to some extent, but can come together to fight a common enemy of sorts. So I don't know if I had to pick one. Sometimes I was like, oh, I want to be Iron Man in that, but he's kind of a little wild, so I don't know if I'd want that one. That's not necessarily me, but anyways, one of the Avengers. I think that idea of bringing together people that aren't necessarily all cut the same way, but they come together for a similar cause and have a similar enemy. I think that's a little bit part of what we're doing, right? We have a similar enemy in this work that we're in, and it's going to take the whole church to be a part of what's happening. That's great. So, Steve, we would love to just kind of hear as we get into this, kind of how you came into the role of field leadership. I know we mentioned kind of the milestones of sorts of your timeline, but what did that transition look like from being a missionary to moving into an actual leadership role within the organization?
Yeah, I think I was pretty typical as far as the transition goes. I was a reluctant leader. I was happy. In the ministry that I was in, working in Tamajic ministry. It was a lot of time sitting on a mat, drinking tea, talking with people, reading scriptures, and I could have seen myself doing that long term for the rest of my missionary career. But the knock kept coming at the door for leadership, and I said no at least 2 or 3 times. But the last time I really sensed it was the Lord saying, no, I'm calling you into this. This is ministry, and leadership provides the context for many others to realize their place and their gifting and how to work together. So I came in reluctantly, and but definitely felt like the Lord clearly called me the last time. And it came gradually. Initially, I became the Tamajic team leader, and then a leader over a region in Niger, then eventually the deputy director, and then was the country director for the last 12 years that we were in Niger.
Wow. I do think that is the general course. And I'm reading through Exodus right now, and Moses was a reluctant leader. There was so much in him that he wanted to just keep being a shepherd. I think he was like, no, do we have to do this? And yet he became one of the greatest leaders in all of Israel.
And as I'm looking for leaders constantly in my current role, I'm not put off by a reluctant leader. In fact, right before I got on with Jesse today, I was writing a leader back who has agreed to enter into a discernment process, but he is definitely a reluctant leader, and that's often the way it is. And also, I'm not looking for someone who is disgruntled or unhappy in their ministry, So I don't feel guilty about calling somebody and asking them to enter a discernment process, because ultimately it's in the Lord's hands. But I'm
Right.
looking for those who have found their place where they're at, because there's a good chance they will find their place in the next season of life as well.
That's good.
Oh, yeah. I was actually going to ask you for yourself, but maybe it's for someone that you're looking for as a leader. Are you looking to fill a gap because someone has left, retired, or is it because you see something in people that you're pulling them up or asking them to consider a role in leadership, or even to your own situations? Was that progression, so to speak, through the different levels, let's say, of leadership, out of gaps and needing to fill them, or just someone seeing something in you and inviting you into growing into that?
Usually the catalyst is a gap, I'll be honest, but I'm learning that you should always have your eye on people and see leadership when it's happening at every level, and be sensitive to that, because that may be the person you're looking at, may be the next person you call and say, I would like you to enter a discernment process about this position. So, yeah. So some of the qualities that I look for, I think we see them in the biblical images of leadership in Scripture. In Scripture, we see the shepherd, or the leader as a servant, or the leader as a steward. And so I think of the shepherd as the loving shepherd. I'm looking for someone who really cares about those around them. I think of the humble servant,
Mm.
the one that doesn't necessarily see himself at the center of the picture, but at the same time is willing to step forward if the Lord calls them. And then finally, the faithful steward, the person that just shows up and is willing to make an initiative, move forward. And so those would be the three qualities, big picture qualities, that I look for: is a loving shepherd, a humble servant, and a faithful steward.
Oh, that's good. I could see too that faithfulness in particular, I feel like is so important, because so much of the ministry that I've experienced has been, it takes a long time, and you need someone that's going to stick with it and keep. And so if you have someone that's not faithful to that call and is easily swayed here and there, it's hard to build anything around that.
Absolutely. I agree with that. If you have someone who's constantly looking for the door, they'll find it.
Yeah, exactly. So in your different roles that you've had, have you, like, do you have any stories or experiences that you could share with us, kind of how your leadership has been shaped in this way, how you came to this kind of looking to identify those three things in a leader?
Well, I think I had mentioned earlier that I was a reluctant leader, and I think part of my reluctance was still having the picture of a heroic leader in my mind, as someone who just knows how to respond to every situation. And what I've learned is nobody steps into a leadership role and picks up where the last leader left off. Everybody has to grow into their role. But also, what I learned when I first became the country director in Niger for SIM, the very first year that I stepped into that role, the treasurer resigned for personal reasons. And we had some labor problems at one of our mission hospitals. And so we were having to deal with a major labor discussion that actually resulted in a strike for a period of time. And so when I had stepped into the role, I said, well, maybe my predecessor solved all the problems, and so it'll be easy. And that was my first year. But I will say what I learned is that there is no one person that has all the answers. And the best thing you can do is bring people together. There are some leaders who will talk to other people individually so that at the end of the day, he or she is the only one that knows everything. And I've found that's not a good model. It's certainly not a good model in today's world. Bring people together, let everybody hear what everybody is saying, and let solutions and options come from the group, and get over thinking you have to be that heroic leader that has all the answers.
Do you find that that can be hard for the team itself? Because I really love the model that you've just talked about. I've even sometimes shared the image of a wheel and spokes and been like, you know what, I am not the hub of this. Everything doesn't have to pass through me. You guys can, like, it can be like a spider, like you guys can talk to each other. If there's someone on the team that has some expertise or knowledge that you need that I don't have, like, talk to each other. But I have found some teams, and maybe it's the way they've been formed, I don't know what it is, really actually struggle with that. They want to go through the leader. They want to have that always one-to-one. Have you experienced that, and what do you do with that?
It's interesting you should say that, Jen, because in 2019, right before COVID started, I had just stepped into my regional role. I have 11 entities, so I had 11 entity leaders with me. And I used that exact analogy. I said, I do not want to be the hub in the wheel. I want to see the lines go from everywhere to everywhere. You know, the solutions are when you guys are talking to each other. And the response in 2019 was, well, we don't know each other that well. We know you. So, you know, we're more comfortable going through you. We just had another leadership retreat in Cyprus about a month ago. And it was so satisfying to see the difference and to see the leaders talking to each other and not seeing the need to have everything pass through the hub. But I think it's taken 5 years to cultivate that.
Okay.
And regular communication. I put out a brief every Monday and encourage people, let's talk about this subject. And now they are starting to write the briefs on Monday morning and talking and getting a discussion going in teams. And so that's very satisfying, but they were not ready for that at the beginning. That had to be cultivated.
Okay, and it was about building relationship, really, and trust between the people on the team. That's really insightful. Okay.
Let's stay there for a minute, because I'm also very intrigued. We didn't say this in the podcast, but I actually studied under Steve's brother, Mike, at university, and studied cultural anthropology. And one of the things I remember Mike teaching on culture was kind of a simplistic view to kind of give us a base, was that of thinking of culture as structures plus values, right? And so I'm thinking you're obviously changed the culture of the team, of the region over the course of the 5 years. What would have been some ways that you might have made structural changes to help that change happen over a course of time, and what would have been ways maybe that you changed or helped them value that more over the course of time?
I would have, and I still do, I have a monthly call-in with each one of them. But in the course of our monthly call-in, I would say, do you know who you really should be talking to? Is this other person. They've been doing this, or they've had this experience. And I said, why don't I set up a connection and you guys can talk about this? And so I've intentionally was looking for ways to be a connector and began to see that the solution is among yourselves. I don't have the answer, but there are people here around us that do. And so that would be one way. The other way is to encouraging if there is a problem. I'll just give you a very current example. We have too many entities and not enough field treasurers. And so this is a real world problem. And so just pulled together a group of people on teams and say, let's talk about a new model. Now that we have options of doing financial support from a distance, what could a new model look like? And so people are starting to contribute to that. And from it, we're starting to invent something new. Well, that fosters this idea of the answer is between us. I don't have the answer now, but probably somebody out there does, and let's explore that. So I think over time the value changed from I have my responsibility and my work here, and if I have any questions, I go to my supervisor. To I have a team, yes, but my team is part of a larger team.
Yeah.
Again, quoting that book that Jen that you read as well, a team of teams. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So in some of the conversation that we've been having, I'm curious. You mentioned that you were a reluctant leader. Was there any sort of training, was it a calling? Was it skills that you recognize you had? How did that transition? You were probably called to missions before called to leadership. So if you could just give us maybe what kind of formation, I guess would be the summary word I would say. What kind of formation happened in you moving into the leadership role?
Yeah, I didn't really have a lot of formal training. I think SIM is doing more now as far as pairing people up with a mentor. But I think I had informal mentors that helped me a lot. And one of the best developers of leaders is a challenging ministry opportunity, being put into a leadership role and making your mistakes, but also growing from them. And so that probably formed me the most. And I guess I also said earlier that I gradually moved into leadership. I never thought I would ever be an entity leader or a country leader, but becoming the team leader for the team working amongst the Tamajic people, well, that was an area of my passion. And so I moved into that and started to see some of my gifts come out in that. And then, I think the Lord has his ways of communicating to you that you have giftings that may be used beyond where you are right now. And so that was part of that transition. What I wish I would have understood when I first moved into leadership was it's okay to play to your strengths. I have always struggled with keeping an inbox down to 0. And for me, a good day is not sitting in front of the computer answering email. I'd much rather be with people talking about ideas and bringing people together around a common initiative, that kind of thing. But then to go back to the office and just respond to email was not life-giving. I'll just put it that way. But I felt like that I was letting people down when they didn't get an answer right away. And so I have wrestled with that for years until I realized there are people who are very gifted at working the communication side or the email side. And so I just learned about myself. I need an executive assistant who helps with a lot of the administrative detail and frees me up to do more big picture kind of thing and people related activities. And so if somebody would have told me that find people who complement you and play to your strengths, I think that would have helped me at the beginning.
Wow, that's good. I won't chase that bunny trail down or whatever the saying is, but I have so many thoughts and questions about that idea of especially the idea of as an assistant. That's something I've been wrestling with a little bit recently.
Well, there's a piece in there too of just self-knowledge and self-understanding, and then almost self-acceptance. Because if we've had leaders that we've looked up to or admired, but they have different skill sets than we do, there can be a temptation to emulate versus that freedom to lean into our strengths, which also means accepting our weaknesses and our limitations and our boundaries. And I think that, yeah, even as we do leader training and leader formation and things like that, that's something that we need to pay attention to, is helping people to know themselves well enough to know, what are my strengths? What do I probably have to figure out how to do, regardless of if it's a strength or not? And what can I delegate or outsource in this role? And I think we don't do leaders any favors either when we're not clear about that as we're leading them. So if as an organizational leader, I'm asking someone to come and be a field leader, but I'm not clear about what actually they have to do and what they can outsource, I'm not doing them any favors either.
Yeah. That's important.
If I could just say, give a shout out to my executive assistant. Her name's Florence Johnson, and she is so good with details. And it has been a life changer working with her. And she's in her lane, and it frees me to be in my lane. And she embraces all my Steve-ness and lets me be me. And it works very well. So that's one of the things that we do encourage our entity leaders, is build a supportive leadership team, because you do not have all the gifts.
Right.
That's
You're not meant to.
we do have that on the list of potential podcast seasons, mini series or episodes, is that exactly that, of support staff. And so maybe we'll have to have Florence on. Usually those are the types of people that aren't usually wild about being on podcasts and stuff. They like being in the background, but we'll see if we can get some of them on to interview them and talk to them.
I'll put her name forward. Go ahead.
So we've talked a lot about kind of the idea of leading down and and leading people that are reporting to us in a sense, but there's also this tension of leading from the middle, because you're not the president of SIM, but you have people that are reporting to you, and so kind of a two-part question I'd love to ask is, just how you navigate the tension of being responsible for implementing a vision and mission that you might not be part of shaping it completely, but also how do you, in the middle of that, advocate for those who you are leading, who are on your team, some of the field staff. Can you expound a little bit on what that's like and what you've learned in your different roles?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I actually do lead from the middle, and you're exactly right. I have my area of responsibility, but it fits into a bigger picture. And I have people above me. And so, first of all, let me say that all leaders lead in all directions. Like, even if you're in the middle, you lead up. You do have influence, but the key to that is trust. You have to build trust with those that you're following, and be sensitive to your initiatives, that your ideas that you think you would love to move forward on. Be sensitive to how it fits into the bigger picture and what impact it might have on the bigger picture. So trust is very important. The old adage, they say it's an African proverb, but I've never been able to chase it down. But they say, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And so building those relationships of trust with the people that you follow, I think, is so important. The other thing I want to say is, I have learned to put the larger organization first. And that turns out to be better for my small sphere of influence. I think it was Patrick Lencioni in his book The Advantage, gives the picture of these two fishermen in a boat, and there's a hole in the back of the boat, and the fisherman in the front of the boat says, "Your side of the boat is sinking." And it sounds ridiculous, but that's what we do sometimes. We imagine that even though the larger entity or the larger organization might have some unhealthiness, my cell or my sphere is doing very well, and that's a misnomer. And it won't be long before the unhealthiness in the larger organization will affect your group as well. In fact, you being a silo will be part of the unhealthiness. So I feel like put the larger interests of the whole organization first and lead your part of it into the bigger vision, and your own sphere or entity will be healthier. So that's what I've seen over the years.
Okay, that really challenges me. So can you give us an example of when you've had to put the organization first? It challenges me in a good way. I'll just say because it's easier for me to see the faults with the big organization and want to protect my team from those versus seeing the errors of those on my team and wanting to protect my organization from that. But I understand what you're saying about the boat analogy, and that works. It's a really good picture. So it would be helpful for me then if you can give me an example.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of one that's not going to be so specific that will get me in trouble.
It could be hypothetical.
One of the areas that we're working on in SIM is governance and trying to understand our own governance. We're a global organization made up of autonomous entities, and yet we come together. And one of the keys to making an organization like that work is we have to build rapport with other entities. Because for example, if we're working in a country like Benin, it may be 7 other entities have an interest in that work there, and they're providing people, they're providing resources. Well, there has to be a way to work together, and so that we are not bumping into each other. There's a common way of working together. Sometimes it takes looking at the big picture and saying, I need to understand what the other entities, what their reality is, so that I can interact with them in a more meaningful way. And sometimes it may seem like the principles and practices and policies that are set out don't really meet my needs. They can seem like a barrier, but actually they help us interact well with each other. And if they need to be changed, let's talk about it together. But rather than huddling and God forbid we become passive aggressive and resist the larger
Right.
organization,
Yeah.
that weakens everybody. So
Yeah, that's good. That's a good example. Thank you.
I was thinking of a coup being formed as you were describing the huddling and thinking, things happen.
And here's the other thing is when you are the leader, the people under you take their cues from you. And if you're negative about the larger organization, they will pick up on that, and
for sure.
they will reflect that, and that helps nobody. So,
Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah, that's really helpful. The example I think is definitely helpful, and there's many people that are listening to this will be a part of organizations similarly, or even supporting missionaries. You know, we have people that listen to us that aren't necessarily missionaries on the field, but they support missionaries, whether as pastors or financial support. And understanding some of the complexity of this is, I think, helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I know this is kind of a jump a little bit, but I would love to just kind of spend a little bit of time hearing how you approach conflict on your team. I think that's something that that we need to talk more about. And, you know, sometimes I think that could be conflict where there's actually something, you know, pressing, someone did something hurtful or something to that effect. But it also sometimes I think could be conflict that is, in a sense, not talked about. And you have to try and bring out and bring people that you know are, you know, fostering resentment or something and trying to address certain things. So I'd be interested to kind of hear how you approach, conflict when leading a team.
Yeah, well, conflict is always uncomfortable, but there is a good uncomfortable. You know, on a team where you have team members who honestly see things differently and are voicing different opinions, but they can maintain mutual respect for one another. And in the midst of having opposing ideas, something even better comes to the surface. That's the ideal for positive conflict. But the kind of conflict that you just mentioned is more the destructive conflict where people do harbor resentment, do hurtful things, people pull back, they avoid engaging with other people as a way of protecting themselves, and it's very common. And I think we all know that interpersonal conflict is the number one unspoken reason why people leave ministry, is just to make the pain stop. And that is the kind of conflict that will tear up a team and stop ministry. And so how do we approach that? The key thing is to bring issues to bear. And as a leader, you're not there to be the judge. I think that is the most important concept that I've had to learn, because people want you to be the judge. They've been hurt. Their perspective, it feels all too real. And they come and they unburden to you, and they want you to see the injustice that has been done. And sometimes there has been injustice done. And they want you to pronounce sentence on the situation, if not the other person, but on the situation, so that they will feel supported. And the other side is looking to this for the same thing from a leader, but that you never want to take that position as a judge. What the first thing I found that is important is to meet with both sides of the conflict, listen very well. I often take copious notes, type them up, and send them to them and say, correct anything that I didn't get right. But just so they know, I have heard them very well on both sides. But when you're bringing people together, it's not about who's right and who's wrong as much as listening to one another, because what happens in a conflict is you stop communicating. And when you stop communicating, you start assuming and presuming that you understand motives. And so when we bring people together, we allow people to tell their story uninterrupted, and then look for some confirmation that the other side has understood their perspective, and then the other side is able to share. It's a beautiful thing when the peacemaker model works. The book by Ken Sande is where someone starts to take ownership in their part of the conflict, and then the other person said, well, I can see the part that I've played, and you can see the conflict start to melt right in front of you because people have starting to understand each other like they've never understood before. Doesn't always work out so well, And it's a heartache when the conflict ends in separation rather than reconciliation. But I will say also, this whole area of conflict resolution, it's a spiritual area. It's a miracle every time that the power of the gospel brings reconciliation and forgiveness. And so it is something to be entered into with prayer and really seeking the Lord's enabling. I can't say that I have a formula that is perfect for it. It's not my favorite thing to be involved in, but it's inevitable. It will find you if you're in leadership.
Is your team sort of aware of this peacemaker model? Is it something that has been explicitly talked about so that as conflicts arise, they understand the process that you'll be taking them through?
We're working on that. We're actually working with an organization called Peacewise, and I'm only getting introduced to it in the last 6 months, but it is something that we're wanting to be more preemptive about and helping people understand the nature of conflict, and that conflict, while it is uncomfortable, it is sometimes it's not necessarily a negative thing, and in fact it's an opportunity for things to come to the light. Worse things happen when things are kept below the surface. So a conflict may be a blessing from the Lord because it's an opportunity to address the underlying issues. So as an organization, we're starting to do these seminars in the different locations and hopefully preemptively prepare people for responding well when they find themselves in a conflict situation. A lot of times people will feel like, what's wrong with people? Why can't they just be patient and love each other until one day they find themselves in that situation?
Yeah.
And they need help. So,
yeah. That's why I was wondering, because I was recently teaching a seminar on conflict resolution, and I thought really the ideal is for the how to navigate conflict conversations to be woven into the culture before there's conflict actually happening. Mm-hmm. So that then people have an expectation, and when you're meeting with them one-on-one and taking the notes, and then they know you're going to bring them together and mm-hmm. this process, it's something that they feel like, okay, I know what I can expect here and I can prepare myself to enter in.
Sounds like premarital counseling should have something like that in there, right?
Yeah, that's a good analogy, actually. I have a good friend who does marriage counseling, and he said, I would much rather do premarital counseling than trying to repair 15 years of destructive communication patterns. You know, he says, if I had to pour my energy in one place or the other, I will give my time to premarital counseling. So that's to Jen's point, is we should be preemptively preparing people for the day when they do find themselves in conflict, but to be prepared and be prepared to face it and to work through it.
Well, as we begin to kind of wrap up our interview, I've been extremely encouraged by some of the stuff you were saying, Steve, and I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but our first season we actually did was based off of Jen's doctoral dissertation. And I forget the exact title, Jen, but it was the concept of doing missions with. And we talked about, the need to do missions with God, with the people of the place that we're reaching, with other organizations. And I couldn't help but hear that throughout all of what you were saying, this idea of leading with others, leading in community, leading together. So I just wanted to give you some space as we're starting to wrap up, and just, what are some encouragement that you would give to, you, as we were talking about earlier, your resume, you've been working in the mission field for over 30 years and have seen a lot of different roles as leader, what would be some encouragement, some advice maybe that you would give an emerging leader, someone who's stepping into an area leader role or field leadership role, or maybe even the regional role? What would be some advice, some encouragement that you would give that person listening?
Yeah, I would just say again something that I said before. Be kind to yourself. Nobody picks up in a leadership role exactly where the last person leaves off. You have to grow into your role, and you will grow into your role in your own way along the lines of your gifting. And so be a learner, be a lifelong learner, and be a good listener. Learn to be present with people and really hear them and suspend judgment. And don't feel the pressure to have the answers, because that's where a lot of the mistakes are made, is when you feel pressure from one person or another to take a quick decision or to take a decisive decision before you've had a chance to really listen and hear different voices. And so be that learner. And if there's areas that you feel that you're not, you don't have the skills, either find people around you that do have the skills, or just realize you can grow, you can learn and become better in different areas. So be that learner, and keep your humility. It's when we lose our humility that we start to build walls to protect ourselves, and that is often when we find we've hurt other people or we've stopped being effective. We lose our platform to lead. So stay humble, be a good learner, be a good listener. That would be my advice to a young leader. And let go of that picture of being the heroic leader. He is not that effective in today's world.
Oh, that's great. It's a little convicting after I said my leadership was the Avengers and the superheroes. I guess I'll take that as an indirect message to me. Thanks, Steve. But no, one of the other things I wanted to ask then in the same line of questioning is, what kind of advice or encouragement would you give those that need to lead up? So how someone that finds themselves in a role that, anyone really would lead up well, any piece of advice that you might give them?
Again, be very patient, listen well to those that are above you, and realize that if you humble yourself in due time, the scripture says you will be lifted up. And so build that bridge of trust with the person that you're leading under, and be faithful. Be faithful to what you've been given, and bring your best to whatever task or responsibility that you've been given. And just as I encourage the leaders to be kind to yourself, be kind to the leader above you. He will have his strengths, but he will have, or she will have, her weaknesses as well. And be kind to them and understanding, and work with them. Play the hand you're dealt, and be the best support you can be to them. And I think when we learn to be good followers, it's inevitable that you'll find yourself in a next level of leadership.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Steve, so much for just the time you're taking out of your schedule to do this interview and to spend time with us. Jen and Alessandro and I were talking earlier this week, and we find every single one of these interviews to be so encouraging and helpful to us. When we started this podcast, we were thinking of the listener more and how we could encourage them and equip them to serve God better, and how we could equip, supporters and partners to understand what the missionary is going through. But we've realized that more and more this has been equipping for ourselves and learning and growing. And I would 100% say that for this episode as well. It will be one that I will listen to again and jot down more notes of takeaways. I think right now the key one is that idea of building trust, definitely with the people above me, but also those that report to me and growing in that humility of trust building.
Well, thank you. It's been a real pleasure to chat with you.
Hey, we want to say thanks for tuning in to today's episode. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and found it insightful. Your ministry is important, and we hope that you consider your time with us as an investment in your work. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with your friends. Until next time, keep going wherever Jesus leads.